Good morning, boys and girls. It's Sunday again, and it's lovely to be back chatting to you all. Over the past few weeks, we've been thinking about the life of David in our kids' address, and we thought about how God chose him to be the next king, and how he was an unlikely candidate to be the next king. We thought about how he trusted completely in God, and was able to go and to fight and to be victorious over Goliath. And last week we thought about his very special friendship with Jonathan. David was a very good king. He was a great person to have to lead the people. He tried to live and to lead God's way. But he wasn't immune to sin. Sometimes he made mistakes and got things wrong as well. Sometimes he was tempted to do things which weren't right. This morning we're going to think about one of those times when he was tempted and when he made a mistake. I wonder if you've ever been tempted to do something that you know just isn't right. I wonder if you've ever been tempted to take something that doesn't belong to you. Let me tell you a little story about whenever I was a little girl. When I was in P1, one day after school, me and my best friend went into a shop, and we decided that we would take something that didn't belong to us. And we decided that we would take some water balloons, but that we weren't going to pay for them. And so each of us took a massive pile of water balloons and we shoved them up our school jumpers while our parents weren't watching, and then we made for the doors. And as we made our way home, these water balloons began to fall out from our jumper. We'd been caught, and we knew there was going to be a consequence for our action. We had very angry parents when they realised what we had done. In 2 Samuel chapter 11, we read a story about David taking something that doesn't belong to him. This wasn't just an object or a toy or a pile of water balloons. This was much more serious than this. This was someone else's wife. David lived in the palace as a king, and sometimes he would spend time walking around the rooftop of his palace. And one day when he was out taking his little walk, a woman caught his eye. And he thought this woman was very beautiful. Her name was Bathsheba. And he thought he'd like to catch a closer glimpse of this woman. So he sends out for her and brings her across to the palace. He just couldn't help himself. He gave in to that temptation. And as he began to talk with this woman, he found out that she had a husband. But that still wasn't enough to persuade him to make a better choice. David made a terrible mistake that day. But instead of David realising that he had done wrong, instead of him owning up to what he had done, instead of him holding his hands up and saying, "Yeah, I made a mess, I shouldn't have, I'm sorry," he tried to cover his mess. He tried to hide his sin. He tried to make sure that no one else would find out about it. Bathsheba was married to a man named Uriah. And Uriah was a soldier in the army. He had been at war while this was happening. He had no idea what was going on at home. David didn't want Uriah to find out. Uriah would have been absolutely furious with David. And so he came up with a plan. And his plan was this. He would put Uriah out on the front line of the battle, the place where the fighting was most fierce and most dangerous, the place where he would be facing the strongest opposition, the place where Uriah wouldn't stand a chance. And Uriah was killed. His life was taken from him. David had made two major mistakes here. He'd been tempted and he'd caved in. But instead of owning up and saying sorry for the wrong thing that he'd done, he tried to create a plan, but he made an even bigger mess. Not only had he taken someone else's wife, but now he had taken someone else's life as well. He'd got himself into a real messy situation. All of us make mistakes. Maybe none of us make mistakes quite like David, but all of us sin. And at times all of us hurt people that are around us. At times all of us need to be forgiven. And the amazing news is that God, in his great love for us, chooses to forgive us. But even better than that, he chooses not to remember our sins. God doesn't run around with a little notebook recording all the wrong things that we've done. He chooses not to remember those sins. After some time, David realised that he'd done wrong. He realised that he'd made a mistake. Remember, David knew God personally. He trusted him. And so he remembers that even though he had got it wrong, even though he had made this terrible mess, he wasn't too far from God's forgiveness. Psalm 51 records David's prayer to God for forgiveness. And I want to share with you just two verses from it. Verses 1 and 2 says this: "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash away all my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. David had got it wrong. David had sinned against God. David had made a mess. But David knew that if he came to God and said sorry and asked for forgiveness, that God loved him enough and was compassionate enough to grant him that forgiveness. God knew exactly what was in David's heart. He knew that David was truly sorry, and so God forgave him. God does exactly the same for us today. Remember a couple of weeks ago we looked at the fact that though humans look at our outward appearance and they judge us for how we look or act or speak, God looks at our heart. God cares about what's on the inside. God cares about the sin that's in our lives. God knows all the things that we think and say and do. He knows when we mean it and He knows when we don't mean it. God's love for us never fails. Even when we let Him down, even when we make a mess, even when we hurt others or we hurt Him, God's love for us never fails. God is always compassionate and caring enough to erase all of our sins and to remember them no more. What an incredible God. But the only way those sins could be washed away was through Jesus. Through Jesus going to the cross. And all of us know that story so well of how Jesus went to the cross to lay down His life for us, and He shed His blood there. And as He shed His blood, that was enough to wash away all of our sins and to forgive us for all the things that we've ever thought or said or done that go against God. But more than that, that was how Jesus invited us into the family of God. And all we have to do to get into that family of God is use three very simple words. Words that we use each day if we're showing good manners. The first is this: sorry. Sorry for all the wrong things I've done, for all the times that I don't think about you, God. Thank you. Thank you for sending Jesus to the cross to pay for my sins. Thank you for loving me. Please forgive me and help me to live a life with you in it. When God hears that prayer, He is so overjoyed. And He will forgive us. Just as He forgave David, He will forgive us as well. But we have to be truly sorry. And when God hears that we are truly sorry, He reaches out and forgives us. So this week, remember David. Remember how even though he's a really good king, he made mistakes and got it wrong. But remember more than that, when he asked for forgiveness, God forgave him. That's the God that we know. The God who loves us, who's compassionate, who's caring, and who wants to forgive each of us. So have a great week. I've loved chatting to you, and I look forward to sharing with you again next Sunday morning.